is Not Sam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Back on Not Sam Wrestling, a buddy of mine, a great comedian, and most importantly, a super wrestling fan, Jamie Kilstein. What's going on, man?
Nothing. Everything I do is just to get me back to wrestling. Like even I had to do comedy shows last week, and I emailed myself. This is so dumb. I emailed myself, be excited about comedy shows because you can practice your wrestling persona. Like I had them bring me up to like songs I would enter to wrestle. Like I didn't care at all about comedy. I was just like, I'm practicing being a wrestler while I'm like headlining at this like very nice comedy club.
So you're legitimately, you're going to make a run for this. You're actually, because I talked to you last, I feel like, so like I observe you and, you know, not only do we keep in touch, but just like, you know, on social media and everything. And
Sure.
like, it does feel like even since we last talked, almost like every week, like your fandom of wrestling and your enthusiasm of wrestling, it grows, right? Like that's what I've noticed, that like, and it's authentic, but it's like, it's this growing thing. Like it feels like the more you allow yourself into the world of sports entertainment, the more you're like, this is my home and I need more. and it just feels like you're slowly inundating yourself with professional wrestling.
Yeah, I feel like everybody who follows me on social media, I either get an email that's like, hey, are you going to kill yourself? And are you okay? Is number one. And then number two is, what's going on with all the wrestling shit? And it's like one or the other. And yeah, I mean, what it honestly is, dude, is it's always been there. I've just stopped caring what other people think. And I don't remember how in depth we got into it. I know we talked about it on my podcast. We must have talked about it when I was on your podcast. But I feel like when I came on yours, I was sort of like rediscovering my love of it. And I trained a little bit with Kendrick and Santino Brothers in LA, but it was really, I was almost telling myself it was like a bucket list thing, you know? And I never really tweeted about it or posted it just because out of the however many thousands of people follow me, I don't know, man, like 100 of them are wrestling fans. And out of those 100, 90 of them are professional wrestlers. And like 10 of them are just like fans who happen to watch wrestling. And this year, I feel like the people who have thrived this year, because, you know, I was not in a good way in the beginning of this year, but I feel like the people who thrived this year were the ones who were like, you know what? Sure, everything is trash, but how am I gonna get through it? And for me, it was do all the shit you've always wanted to do, because you know, I talked about this on my Instagram today, where there are so many people who aren't living the lives they want, who aren't doing the shit they want to do, and they still got fucking fired because of COVID or because of the economy or because of whatever. So I was kind of like, you know what, I'm done posting about what I think other people want or talking about politics, because like that's what I used to do. And I'm like, if I confuse everybody every Monday night, every Wednesday night, like I don't care. I'm just gonna find a new audience and posting about wrestling and going after wrestling and being involved and talking to wrestlers and listening to wrestling podcasts. Like I finally was like, this is the thing since fucking childhood that made me happy. I just have always had that part of my brain that goes, not only that says, this is stupid, what are you doing? You're 5'7" and 38, but also the part of my brain that goes, hey man, you're already a comedian. Like you won. You dropped out of high school. You're doing a fun thing. You don't have to go overboard with wrestling. But the bottom line is like, comedy doesn't make me happy like wrestling. I mean, the last wrestling show I went to before quarantine, O'Reilly got me into, it was just a house show. It was just an NXT house show. And the feeling I get when I see a wrestling ring, I have never walked into a comedy club and been like, this 2-drink minimum. It's wistful of nostalgia. Yeah, I'm just like, where do I sit in the back? And I'm in the shadows and I'm just kind of like begrudgingly waiting for my set, but there's something just about wrestling. And so it really was just, yeah, man, I finally like embraced it and stopped caring what other people think and just declared this is going to happen. So what you're seeing is what's always been there. I'm just being more open about it.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that you start by following the things that make you feel good and that you're good at. And generally speaking, if you're good at them, they make you feel good, and vice versa. Like it's not like and you're not going to be good at every single element of it, but you follow your passion, right? And you just surround yourself, I should say, with the stuff that makes you feel good. And then the more intimately you get to know the world, the more you figure out where you fit into it.
Yeah, and like I don't want to sound too self-helpy off the top, but I will say to that point, so to give everybody kind of like the short backstory, which is, I decided I was going to go down to train with Thunder Rosa for a week for fun. We became friends over the internet. She saw my like jujitsu videos and she does MMA stuff. And she was like, just come down and train, dude. Just come down. She's training with Jazz and Rodney Mack. And she was like, just come hang with us. And I was like, all right. And then the next week I had DDP on my podcast and floated that I was thinking about wrestling or training. And DDP lit up.
I mean, dude,
just lit.
If you're trying to get motivated to do something for yourself, DDP's the guy to talk to.
That's the guy. If you're just like, hey, I'm thinking about quitting drinking, you just see his face slowly like light up and you open your email and you already have like a bunch of like yoga videos and shit.
Yeah.
And he was like, fuck yes, you can do it. Started texting me, gave me his number. And I went out with Thunder Rosa. And dude, Thunder Rosa, Jazz, and Rodney, they just started a wrestling school called Dog Pound in San Antonio. I've never been around more positive people in my life ever because they just fucking love wrestling.
Right.
I didn't even know I was religious until the end of practice where we all held hands and said a prayer. And I was like, yep, I guess I believe in God.
Yep. Clearly. Yeah. I thought I was an atheist, but God was hiding in this wrestling gym. I didn't know he was here the whole time.
Dude, fucking Thunder Rosa was like, I wish I had a picture of you. She's like, you look like you were touched by God. Like my face must have just been pure bliss. And so then I was just like, I'm going to do it. So back to what I was going to say with the self-help thing. What's so wild is because I've always been all over the place. I've had like a love-hate relationship with comedy. I've quit. I've done the podcast, all this stuff. But what's so crazy is when I've laser focused on wrestling, everything's gotten better. The stand-up's gotten better. The podcasts have gotten better. I've been healthier. I've been training harder with jiu-jitsu, like not just with wrestling. And I think it's just because I have a goal now and I know exactly what it is. And I'm not giving up comedy and all that stuff, but everything I do is now, how will this make me a better wrestler? How will this, whether it's on the writing side, the creative side, the physicality, health, whatever. Like, dude, this is the first time I've eaten healthy because I was just like, ugh, they're all hot and in shape. So I can't get away with not doing it.
Yeah, especially if you're short, right? Like if you're short and out of shape, it's like, bro, like you don't have control over your height, but what are you doing?
I know. I said that to DDP. He was like, bro, I'm only, he was like, I was 35. And I was like, yeah, but you're like 6'3" and wore leather pants. And I'm 5'7" and this, whatever this is. So yeah, I'm afraid of heights. I'm like, I don't want to go to the top rope. I'm not gonna be doing high flying stuff. I'm like, I can fight.
Well, I'll tell you this, though.
Comic.
The beauty of being 5'7". I don't remember. It might have been Pat McAfee. Somebody told me that the thing about going to the top rope that you don't understand until you get up there is that you look at the top rope and you go, that's not that high.
It doesn't look high.
And then you get up to the top rope and you realize that you got to add about 6 feet because from your foot is on the rope. So your whole height is added to where that top rope is, and that's where it gets high. But you're only 5'7", so that's a lot easier than being 7 feet tall if you're on the top rope, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I've only like sat up there. I feel like I jumped off the second rope once. But
Dude,
I was
that's where you can just master that second rope Bret Hart elbow, so you never have to go right to the top.
Well, dude, you know what I'm actually doing? Not to like, what I'm actually doing is, if I made a list And I feel like this is advice everybody, whether you want to do wrestling or not.
Mhm.
But if I made a list of all the reasons I shouldn't do wrestling, which the majority of people, all we do every day is make a list of why we're garbage. We're just like, this sucks. This is bad. This is why I can't do this. And I've been there. I've done that so much. But you can like reverse engineer the list. So I think it was Mark Duplass, the filmmaker and actor, who I heard talking about this on like Dax Shepard's podcast. And he said something about how restriction can breed creativity. So, you know, the Duplass brothers got their break. They were kind of saying no to agents because agents were kind of like dicking them around in LA. And they were in Austin and they just kind of made their own films, got into Sundance, did everything themselves. And they said because they had like a low budget, because they couldn't do all these things, it made them better writers. It made them more creative with the writing. I feel like with me and with wrestling, or with anybody listening to the show, you can change. Okay, so for example, so I'm older and smaller. Cool. I'm not going to be as athletic as everybody else, but I can study storytelling, which all the old people who have podcasts seem very angry that there isn't as much storytelling. So I'm like, great, I can do that because like I'm a writer and I'm a comedian, or I'm 5'7", I'm afraid of heights. Okay, well, I've done Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu for 15 years, so I can study like all those old like Japanese matches, and I can like have more of like that like hard-hitting shoot style. I'm divorced and have depression and all of these things. Great. I'm just going to be happy to be there. I've lived life. I've rock bottomed. I'm not going to be like, why aren't I in this match? Why aren't there? I'm just going to be so goddamn happy. You can always turn those negatives. I mean, being afraid of heights, it's like, great, I need to like mat wrestle. I can figure out how to put all my jiu-jitsu. Like, dude, there's so much that actually could make me stand out because I can't do, you know, the crazy flippy high spots that everyone's doing. It's like, well, everyone's doing that.
Or you tell people you're afraid of heights, right? You let the world know. Yeah. And then you go up to the top rope.
I was thinking about this.
And you can see if somebody's really afraid or if they're acting. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could tell if somebody is really having a moment, that's when it really works. So the idea that your fear of heights, you could just make it a thing. You can let people know.
Yeah, like mid-match, looking like I'm going to go up to the second rope, not being able to do it, and the crowd's like, ugh. Then when I get up there, if I can make the crowd pop for the most basic of like mid-rope elbow drops, that would be like, that's how you tell a fucking story.
You're the Rudy of double axe handles.
Yeah. But like, it's forcing me to, and this also is why I realized how much I love it, is I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I should study. Like, I should study especially before I get to Texas. So I've been studying all these like classics that I've never really studied before. And it is just, not only am I learning, but it's also reinvigorating my love of wrestling. And then the more you love the thing, like you said, that you're going after, the better you're going to get at it, just because you're fucking happy.
So, yeah, I was actually just telling somebody today, like, I'm at this place in my life that I love where, like, you know, I'm doing a ton of work to get the show done for the WWE network. And then I'm also doing this podcast. And then I'm also watching wrestling. So, like, I finally get some free time and I'm watching, like, YouTube videos. And my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm watching the Wrestling Bios channel on YouTube. Like, I'm just watching more wrestling stuff. Yeah. Because, like, at no point in this whole process of talking about wrestling in my life has it ever felt like work, or I need to take a break, or I don't want to talk about this anymore, because it's, you know, I love it so much. So,
and I didn't realize that, by the way, like with me, because I was like, with comedy, being the tortured artist is kind of the vibe. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm miserable because I'm supposed to be miserable. And then suddenly, once I did what you are describing and I'm just around wrestling, like the idea of sitting around watching stand-up all day, I would fucking kill myself.
Yeah,
absolutely not. But now that I'm like, oh, wrestling's my job, the exact same thing happened, where I'm like, I'm gonna watch a movie tonight, and then I like slowly flip over to documentary. Like, that's what I did last night, and it was fucking great.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I do those bits on the WWE network where, this week I was talking about the Daniel Bryan story leading to WrestleMania 30. I'm not just like going off the top of my head. I spend days leading to that, going on the network and watching every segment and every match leading to it. So I go through every episode of Raw and look for. Luckily, they label it, like they chapter it, so I don't have to, but I'm enjoying it so much. And like you remember, oh my God, like I'm sitting there going, man, January 2014 was a rough time for WWE. But February and March of 2014 was awesome. And like you remember these little things that just, it's so much fun. But
and just with you, the cool thing with you is that like I'll blow you up a little bit, which is I think the reason you've had so much success, because even when you did my podcast, it must have been last year, and I was at your studio and we were just talking about you're not giving a fuck and just obsessing over wrestling has led to you living the dream. You at no point were on the podcast being like, oh, I'm not going to be happy until I have a show on the network, or you just straight up followed, how can I talk about wrestling? How can I make a living doing the thing I love? And because of that, and because you've ignoring all the bullshit you've gotten, like whatever, it led to bigger things. And if you weren't doing a show on the network and you were just talking about wrestling in your place, you'd be just as fucking happy. So like, that's what people don't understand, is sometimes it really is as simple as just go balls out with the thing you love.
Yeah. And you got to figure out how to make it work. You got to make a living. I got a family. I can't if I wasn't making a living, I can't ignore my family, just watch wrestling because it makes me happy. Like at some point, well, you got to be a person.
Let me rephrase that. What I mean is you weren't thinking about, it wasn't. I feel like so many times, at least with comedy, I mean, I'll get people writing me that are like, hey, I want to be a writer or I want to be a comedian. And they're like, how do I get paid, before they've even gotten on stage?
Oh, yeah. No. It's like,
no, you have to love it so much that even if you had a day job, Sam, like you would still be watching wrestling.
That's all I'd be watching.
You'd be a far worse husband and father, but you would be watching wrestling on that off time.
And I'd figure out how to do something that contributes to the household with it. It's what you do. You figure it out. Like, you just surround yourself with it, and then you start thinking creatively, how can I contribute to this world that will contribute back to me? Yeah. And there you go. So are you moving to Texas full time for wrestling school? Are you relocating?
Yeah.
This is crazy. This is crazy, Jay. This is a crazy thing you're doing.
Here's the funniest part about it is, so I'm moving to Austin. So I'm going to drive.
What?
Because I have a bit of a community. I have a bit of a community in Austin outside of wrestling. And then the wrestling school, Thunder Rosa and Jazz and them, Rodney, are in San Antonio. So it'll be like an hour and a half drive, like probably 4 days a week. And then I'll be doing jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and stuff in Austin. And whenever I tell somebody, because the biggest story in comedy is Rogan.
Sure.
And so whenever I tell people that I'm moving to Austin, they go, oh, that makes sense for the comedy scene and for Rogan. And I go, who? No. I'm going for independent, now AEW star Thunder Rosa to train as a professional wrestler at the age of 38. It has literally... Also, I forgot Rogan moved there. I mean, that'll be cool. It's great for the comedy scene. But I'm like, no, I'm going to be wrestling every
also,
day.
By the way, there's no wrestling shows right now. So that should also be like we're in the middle of quarantine. So there's technically no wrestling shows right now. So hopefully by the time you're ready to be on a wrestling show, wrestling shows will be back. But in the meantime, you'll be ready.
But that's great. Like selfishly for me, because it's just less pressure. It's just because, again, I mean, and even DDP talked about this when he was on my show, where, because I even started jujitsu kind of late. Like I did martial arts in high school and my early 20s. But then when comedy took off, I just started like smoking cigarettes again, because I was like going out with Stanhope and like, I wanted to be fucking Bill Hicks. And so I was a train wreck. And then I really didn't go full time with jiu-jitsu again until I was like 27. So even then I was kind of the old guy.
Sure.
And what DDP said he did, which is kind of what I did in jiu-jitsu, is I'm not going to be more athletic than you, but I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to be a better learner. And so that's kind of where I'm at with wrestling, where I don't have that. You watch the 20-year-old blue belts, they get tapped out and they hit the mat. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to be the hit the mat guy. And again, especially with wrestling, I'm just going to be a fucking dork. and just study it. So the fact that like there aren't shows right now, I'm like, great. I can lay in waiting and I can just work and study and study. So yeah. So when there are,
and
here we go.
You're right. It's a lot less pressure because you don't feel like there's like a deadline that you're like, okay, there's a show this week. I have to get on the show this week. I have to hurry up and like, you can just spend the time.
I'm not missing out.
Learning.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's all about figuring out the advantages that you have, and maturity would be the advantage that you would have over a virile young person. Do you have any specific goals in the training? Are there any goals that you want to hit, or any marks that you go, okay, if this happens, or if I get to this place after this amount of time, I'm going to call it quits, or anything like that? Or are you just going in and seeing what happens?
Yeah. So no, I mean, I'm going for it. And it's interesting because I joked about the Rogan thing, but I was getting a lot of anxiety about the move because I didn't have the balls to tell people that I was doing it for wrestling. Yeah. So when I talked to my manager or agent or dad, I was like, you don't want to tell your dad at 38, like, hey, my backup plan for comedy is professional wrestling, don't worry. So I was saying, Rogan's down there, all the On It podcast guys are down there, and like all that stuff is true, but I think because I wasn't being honest with myself, I started to be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And when I just said, I'm going down for wrestling, because even like Thunder Rosa and I made 2 comedy sketches and they were fucking great. And so even if I never make it to the WWE, to AEW, to whatever, being around creative people, I mean, man, I probably did say this on your podcast last time. And I was talking to Ron Funches when I did his podcast about our love of wrestling. And my biggest struggle has always been when I'm creative, when I'm solely focused on comedy. That's when I'm like, I'm not that healthy. I kind of fall into that, like, I'm the degenerate artist, peer pressure bullshit. But I'm creating, I'm making stuff, I'm performing. When I go full into jiu-jitsu or MMA, I'm healthy, I'm waking up early, I'm meditating, I'm eating well, I'm confident, but I'm not creating. So then I lose that. When I first walked into Brian Kendrick's class in Los Angeles, and because I was always telling people, if only I could find the middle ground. And suddenly it's just these hot, jacked theater dorks. I'm like, oh, this is what I've been looking for.
Right, I think we did talk about that, yeah.
The middle ground. So I don't plan on failing, but even if I fail, I feel like having that as my community, just funny, fearless, healthy people, I can't really go wrong.
I mean, I also think it's silly to like even say like, oh, I'm not planning on failing. It's like, what is failing? Like just going through the process is succeeding. Like like there is no, it sounds like Yoda, but there is no failing because like it would be very naive of you to sit there and go, well, if I don't make it onto television as a wrestler by the time I'm 40, which by the way, you're 38 now, like, yeah, it was a total waste of my time and I'm going to quit and I'm a failure. Like that's, if you were going in with that attitude, I'd be like, Jamie, like we should probably talk offline because this is a terrible idea. This is bad. You shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
I mean, just the idea that you're like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to train and this is what I'm going to do right now. Like
it's going to make everything in my life better no matter what happens. Healthier, more creative, around supportive people, and doing something I've literally dreamt of doing as a kid. I mean, I posted a clip the other day, me and a local wrestler who started doing some like, he's doing that like primetime TV stuff.
Yeah.
EJ Sparks, who's great. He's in Tucson and we go to the same kickboxing gym. And we started working little matches, and he's been showing me stuff in a boxing ring while there were cardio kickboxing classes going on. I watched that footage on my phone, and I got like goosebumps when I did a thing right. Like that is enough for me right now. And so just being there, I win. I've already won. I honestly feel like, and the other thing I'm going to start doing is writing. Help for these like indie promos or for these like indie organizations. Like, hey, give me your shittiest characters. I will help, and I'm going to learn how to write, and I'm going to help them with promos, and I'm going to write storylines and stuff like that. If I keep doing it, I remember Henry Rollins told me this once. It's not really the most inspiring advice, but goddamn, it's so pragmatic. He's like, if you don't quit, and the Bucks told me this on my podcast. He's like, if you just do it, if you just fucking do it every day, there's gonna be a place for you. You know, if I'm like, I have to be the world champion by 41. All right, well,
That's a little
terrible news,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't mean to. I'm not a negative person,
but again,
no,
we will talk offline.
Yeah, no.
but the idea that I won't at least have part of my full-time job writing, wrestling, indie organizations, bigger indie organizations, it's gonna happen as long as I do the things that I say I'm going to do, which is train hard, study hard, treat it like a real fucking job. But most importantly, be happy doing it and be humble doing it and be fucking patient. And so I'm going to do it until the wheels fall off. Like there's no reason not to. It ties into every other facet of my life, from comedy to jiu-jitsu to kickboxing to, you know, except it actually makes me happy. So yeah, I mean, there's no like deadline to when I'm going to stop. What I can say for sure is I'm going to be around wrestling for the rest of my life. I just don't know how, in what capacity.
Is there anybody that you watch now that either motivated this decision to move further, or that you go, yeah, that's more specifically what I want to be doing?
You know, it's interesting. I've been going back. So there are definitely guys that I watch that I go, ooh, this is interesting. Like personality wise, no one pops me more. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn. I mean, just incredible, because they're being themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Which I think that in comedy, they always say like it takes 8 years to find your voice. And that sounds like such an insane thing, because you go, well, I know my voice. I am me. But then you get on stage for the first time and you're just like, what is happening? You're talking like a caricature of a comedian, you know, like if Michelle Obama went up at like the fucking Improv, she'd be like, so I'm fucking Barack in the ass. You'd be like, what is happening? You're talking like you think a comedian sounds.
Of course.
So like you're dirtier, you're, you know, whatever it is. And so those people like in wrestling who it's just so clearly them and their personality, and it's just, maybe it's a little more over the top. Those guys I really look up to. Wrestling wise, like I loved FTR and AEW are like incredible, like the storytelling, the basics. And then I've just been going back and watching like old Shawn Michaels and watching old Bret Hart and like the guys I grew up on. And I mean, even Austin, and watching these guys and just being like, they're so good at what they do. It's like that Bruce Lee, I don't fear the man who knows 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who practices like the same kick 10,000 times.
Yeah. That all goes back, by the way, like 10,000 kicks, finding your voice after 8 years, like that. That's all the 10,000 hours rule of being an expert. You know, that's that Malcolm Gladwell, you know, you have to do it for 10,000 hours before you're an expert. What have you been, what have you been going back specifically? Like what shows and what matches have you been going back and watching on the network that's got you all jazzed up?
Oh my God. I've been watching a lot of Shawn. I mean, Shawn was my favorite growing up.
Whoa.
Oh, you know who I want?
By the way, Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all time, so that would probably be a good one to start. Yeah.
This little up and comer, Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
But like, man, when I rewatched, I think the match that made me go like all in, was when I rewatched the Shawn Taker Hell in a Cell match
from Bad Blood.
Just bananas.
Yeah.
And you know, I know you rewatched it like because of the Kane stuff, and like
plus like I probably watch that match every like 3 months anyway. So like
it was just bonkers. But like I haven't gone back and really studied Bret since I was like,
Bret's a genius,
dude. And like I just forgot what I have on deck that I haven't watched since I was a kid. Is the Austin Bret match, the I Quit match. I haven't watched.
It's a clinic. It's a class. Like that's like not only, I'll tell you, it's a class, and it's not only just in a match in wrestling, it's in character work, not just because of the double turn, which is so difficult to do, especially with established characters like Austin and even more so Brett. Brett was the babyface's babyface.
Right.
So the fact that that double turn happened, but also you get to know who you can understand who these characters are if you've never seen them before just through watching that match. And a really important thing to keep in mind is Austin doesn't do submissions like as a wrestler. Like he's not a submission guy, and it's a submission match. So it's like, how does this guy who is not he's not the world champion Stone Cold Steve Austin, best to ever do it yet.
Right.
He's not on that level yet. You know there's something there, but he's not that yet. Yeah. And watching this, you're like, not only do you see, oh my God, this is why Stone Cold is the future of this is why Stone Cold is going to change the business forever, but you go, oh, this is why Brett is on the level that Brett's on. It's unbelievable.
Dude, I've been watching a ton of interviews as well, like shoot interviews and stuff. And I just watched, I have this like new obsession with fucking Eddie Kingston. And he was talking about how whenever someone comes over, he shows them the Stone Cold interview, the ECW one, where he just goes off when he's like, no one's gonna stop me. Yeah. And I'd never seen that before.
All the superstar Steve Austin ECW stuff when he's doing like Steve Mania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I used to go to ECW.
The Monday NyQuil promo where he's got the Eric Bischoff wig on and he's like, welcome to Monday NyQuil. And he's just out of his mind because he's finally free from WCW and he can just get everything off his chest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't remember that. I mean, I was an ECW guy. I lived on the East Coast. I would go to the ECW shows, and I just like do not remember any of the Austin stuff. I'm watching that promo, and I mean, look at what's happening now with Heyman and Roman Reigns, and like there's so much. When you just like there's certain people when you just let them go. And I feel like that was kind of the beginning of Austin, right? Just like
definitely was.
And then it's you just have fucking magic. I mean, even another person I've been loving recently is Gargano on NXT.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it feels like his heel work. He is so funny.
Because he's never like he's always been this amazing wrestler, but such a good guy that the side of him that is able to entertain that hasn't really come out until now. And you're sitting there going like, oh my God, like I thought that what he had to contribute to wrestling was wrestling. It was wrestling, was the matches, the Ciampa series of takeover matches. I was like, that's the legacy. But then you're like, I'm almost as happy just watching him and Candice cut promos in their house. I mean, these are brilliant.
Just like an angry suburban father. It is fucking incredible. And then on commentary on Monday, he's so funny and he's quick. Yeah. Like when he was marching to the ring last week and Kevin Owens, he made some like, is this punked reference, like some dated, and Kevin Owens was like, oh, that was really topical. And Gargano right away just goes, thank you. Like very like earnestly.
He really appreciates that.
So good. And actually I feel the same way about AJ Styles right now. We're obviously like, I've been a huge fan of AJ's wrestling forever. But when he was a babyface, it was kind of like, all right, yeah, he's just the good guy and everyone likes him. And then he has good wrestling matches. And if he doesn't have a good wrestling match, that's kind of it. He is goddamn hysterical as a heel.
He's great. I love when he found out that Almost could speak English and he had no idea. I thought that was brilliant. But
or when he found out that that Almost had a relationship with Riddle. And they've talked before.
Yeah.
Just disgusted.
But
so furious.
There's really good on that same level. I think I want to say it's like from probably not as far back as 2016. Maybe it's 2018. I don't know. It was whenever his rivalry with John Cena was the beat up John Cena era of AJ Styles. Because not only was he having great matches with John Cena, like whatever that year was, maybe it was SummerSlam 2018. There's a SummerSlam match between John Cena and AJ Styles that's like outrageous.
Well, I know you always ask guests. Oh, also when he's authentically funny or when he's off being like himself is fucking Corbin. Like I know
Corbin's awesome,
dude. when for some reason the Mysterios all were horrible people last week during the Corbin Buddy Murphy match.
You see that I had to tweet Charles Robinson about what a terrible referee he was? I was livid. Like, I've been watching wrestling for over 30 years. And I'm sitting there, and it was a great episode of SmackDown. The ending was outrageous with Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns and everything.
Perfect.
Livid on my couch going like, would these Mysterios mind their own business? And like I'm like, look, like Corbin needs to come back and do something so horrifically, inhumanly violent to the entire Mysterio family.
All of them.
To the point where you're like, how could a human being do this? And I'm going to sit there and say, the Mysterios and Charles Robinson, by the way, drove Baron Corbin to do this. It's their fault.
There was a point where, and especially what makes it even more insane, is there wasn't a feud with Baron Corbin before this. Baron Corbin did not do anything to the Mysterios.
No, he kind of made fun of him a little bit.
A little bit.
He kind of made fun of him a little bit.
But you're torturing him. And there was a point, I don't know, man, like the 5th or 6th interference where Baron Corbin did something just like, what's happening? Or like, why are you doing this? And he was just, he looked like a fucking baby face. And it was so hysterical that, yeah, you're right. He has to torture them.
Like do something like really bad. Like break bones.
What did you say? I'm so sorry I went off on the Corbin thing.
Never be sorry for going off on
something.
Never.
Oh, AJ.
Oh yeah, AJ. But by the way, on this podcast, never be sorry about going off on a Baron Corbin rant. This is the one podcast, the one wrestling podcast in existence that will sit here. We'll turn it into a Baron Corbin fanboy podcast. I am a Baron Corbin fan, period.
I am such a fan of Baron Corbin. I feel like we should just talk about Baron Corbin and Lana.
Lana's great.
I know. I was like,
but what were you going to say about AJ? We're going to get off track again. What were you going to say about AJ? I was talking about AJ.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I was going to say I literally had a tweet with 0 likes when they asked who they wanted to headline, when the WWE account was like, who should be headlining WrestleMania? And I was like, Lana and Nia. And Lana wins the belt. So you always ask people on this show, because you brought up Cena and AJ, the era that they did not watch. And
I love that
mine
question.
was the Cena one. I missed all of that. So Cena, Batista, the only match I watched from that era, which I watched recently, was Punk Cena, because
Money in the Bank.
Punk Cena. Yeah. But all of that. I gotta kind of learn like what are the good things to go back and watch, because I totally missed all of that. I just watched the WCW. I just watched that crazy ass Survivor Series match for the first time about like, will WWE be out of business? Will Austin turn?
Oh, the Alliance era?
Yeah, with like Angle, Rock,
the Invasion,
like all of that. Like I never seen that match before.
Yeah, I would Cena. First of all, Cena's worth studying. And I think that you're going to find that as the years progress, respect for Cena, and you'll remember this conversation because you remember things like this, but like respect for Cena is going to grow and grow and grow. And like there already is
this. People hit on him just because it's like the cool thing to do? Because I just assumed I wouldn't like him.
Well, no, I mean, look, he was almost Hogan-esque in the sense that he was like a kind of goody gumdrops superhero type who like just worked hard and got it done, and people were like there wasn't a lot of edge to him. I mean, whenever John would show edge, people would lose their minds for it. Like the stuff he did with The Rock, people would lose their minds for it. If you're gonna watch, and I think that like at the time, people didn't realize how consistently good John Cena was. They didn't realize how much consistent star power that he maintained, being a star on the level that he maintained for 10 years, which is insane and totally unheard of. Nobody's ever had a run as long and as consistent as John Cena. And I mean, he did so much. And like, what drives me crazy, and one day, like, I want to interview John Cena to talk to him about this, because when you think about John Cena, like you think about this guy who, I spent 10 years in the main event and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, no, because he goes and he did a lot of main events throughout WrestleManias, right? And he's like, WrestleMania 21 is his first main event with JBL, and he goes through and he's got his triple threat at 24, I think. It didn't close the show because Edge and Undertaker closed the show, but it goes up to 28, and he's got his once-in-a-lifetime match with The Rock, and the build for that match is outrageous. Then it goes to, well, first of all, it goes to 27, right? 27, he lost to The Miz in the main event of WrestleMania 27. Like, Hogan never had to do that. You were never going to tell Hogan that we've got this like weaselly heel and we're going to bring back a legend to get the big applause at the end of the show, and you're going to lose to him. Like, that's what people don't understand, like the level of, like, John Cena doesn't want, on a real level, he doesn't want to lose to The Miz and have The Rock get the applause break at the end of WrestleMania. He's like, I've been busting my ass all year. I want to hold the title up and have a stadium full of people cheering for me and be the man, because that's what I've been working towards. But it's not going to happen this year, John. And then a year later, it's WrestleMania again, and he's got this fabulous build with The Rock. And he loses again at WrestleMania 28. And you're like, oh my God. And he's got to, like, okay, pick himself up by his bootstraps. And then by the next night, The Rock is gone. And he's got to convince the audience that he's still the star that, you know, they think he is. WrestleMania 29, he's got his second match with The Rock, finally beats him. And that's the last time John Cena's in the main event to WrestleMania. WrestleMania 29. I mean, WrestleMania 30, 31, like all these other matches, he's on WrestleMania, but WrestleMania 30, he was with Bray Wyatt. WrestleMania 31, he's with Rusev, you know, and it goes on from there. But like the idea that John Cena didn't get a WrestleMania main event after 29 is crazy to me, because he was just around so much and so consistent. But back to the original point.
Yes.
If you're going to go into the John Cena playbook and study, I would say the build up to the first match with The Rock is incredible. Incredible. Cool. Like the last couple of months, because it's a year build. I mean, they announced it a year in advance, but really the last couple months where they're going promo for promo. And there's if you like real stuff, there's this real moment where like 2 weeks or something before WrestleMania, The Rock is in the ring, and The Rock, this whole build towards WrestleMania goes really hard at John, like on a real life level. Like it's the type of thing where, and you realize that on a certain level, The Rock knows that he's performing at such a level that if you can't meet him there, then he doesn't want to be there. So he's going to try to humiliate you, and it's up to you
to step up,
to step up and get on his level. So he's going after Cena hard.
What a nightmare.
And there's this one moment, and John Cena's talked about it before, where The Rock is in the ring, and he's got his promo written on his arm, and you can kind of see it. And like, it's The Rock, like, you got your promo on your arm? Like,
yeah.
What do you do? So Cena goes out there, and off the cuff, he goes, you got your promo written on your arm. And you see, dude, you've got to go back and watch this, because you see The Rock's face change.
Shit.
You see his face change.
My heart just stopped.
Yeah. And he's like, what did you just, like, he's like, do you know who I am? Like, I'm movie star. I'm Dwayne Johnson. Okay. Like, what are you doing to me on live television right now? And Cena's just looking right at him going, yeah, I said it. I can see it. And so can they. And it's like, okay, this is for real, for real.
Holy fuck.
And so that whole promo build up towards WrestleMania 28 is awesome with The Rock. But my favorite John Cena rivalry, promos, matches, everything, is Cena versus Edge. I love. I'm
a huge Edge fan, so I would be all over that.
And it's rated R Superstar Edge, and it's this like Edge had to work so hard, and he had been around for years, and he had gone through the Attitude Era, and he had clawed.
Well, that was my Edge childhood and nostalgia is all the tag stuff with the Dudleys and with the Hardys.
Right.
And so I came up on the Brood on Edge and Christian.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really see a ton of his solo stuff until, he came back at the Rumble.
But yeah, so you've got all that history, right? You started the Attitude Era and the TLC stuff and the Hardy stuff and the Dudley stuff. And then he goes solo, and he's part of the SmackDown 6 where he's on SmackDown like just as the Attitude Era is ending, and he's just starting to build this name for himself where people are really paying attention to him as a single star. And then he turns heel, he becomes the Rated R Superstar, and he does like the best work of his career. I mean, I love Rated R Superstar Edge, but
I would much rather study him versus Cena than go back on the ladder matches because, again, afraid of heights, and Cena does not look like he flies off the top rope a lot.
well, there's a TLC match between John Cena and Edge.
Oh my God.
Where Edge takes an attitude adjustment off the top of the ladder through a table.
Christ.
It's like the most insane thing. But yeah, because Edge has all this history and he like works and so there's this like undertone of, man, I went through the Attitude Era and then I went through the post Attitude Era and I finally got to this place.
Yes.
And then you just strolled up. You just strolled up, John Cena, and now you're the guy. And it's like, and you've got, and he's the Rated R Superstar, and John Cena is the face of this new TV PG era. And yeah, it's awesome. It's such a great counterbalance of characters and of talent, and the matches are good, and Edge is at his peak, and John Cena is just becoming the superstar that he's going to become. Okay. Yeah, Edge versus Cena is a good rivalry.
I'm going to go back. I feel like, I don't know if there's a rivalries. I just started diving into that rivalry show on the network, which is so cool because it literally lays out the stories,
There's a Untold, the Untold series.
Yes.
There's a documentary about John Cena and Edge, which is, they do a real good job of laying it out. But,
my album comes out literally tomorrow and I should be promoting that. And literally, I'm just going to be doing this.
Yeah, this is what you do. You watch the documentary.
Yep.
And then you figure out what the dates are. And then you got to go back and watch every match and every segment. I mean, that's the what I do. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
I have to call my manager. I mean, this is why, again, this is my goal. Every day, a little less comedy, a little more wrestling, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah, and there's comedy in wrestling. But you're right. You have an album coming out, Jamie. What are we doing here? Let's tell people, I don't
know. Guys, just get the album on Spotify. You won't have to pay for it. Let it get to #1 so that all these wrestling people are like, oh, who's this Kilstein guy? Then they go to my Twitter. They see all I'm posting about is fucking wrestling. And they're like, we should get this guy in the writer's room. And then that's it. It's all a fucking facade. This album should just be called I Want to Be a Wrestler. Like,
you stream.
That's what it is.
If you stream the album, and you could you could push play on the album and go to sleep as long as the stream is happening, as long as the numbers are building.
You could turn the volume down and then you could go watch fucking Cena Edge Untold, which is what I'm going to do.
Right. And then you're watch the matches. Don't just watch the documentary. Don't just get the story. Watch, because you got to watch the whole match. You got to get the entire context. You can't just retell somebody else's telling of the story.
Look, if you guys want me, don't you guys want another person? Here's what me and Sam have in common.
Right.
When it comes to wrestling. And we both probably get shit for it. I know you get shit for it.
I don't get it.
We just want it to be good. And we just want to enjoy it all the time. I don't understand people who watch wrestling 3 nights a week and hate it 3 nights a week. It's like, guys, go out and do something else.
Yeah, don't watch it.
Like,
it's awesome.
You're torturing yourself.
Yeah, you sound like Jamie Kilstein watching stand-up comedy right now. Go find your next thing.
It's not fun. I have problems that I see, but I still don't understand the draft. I feel like it fucks up Survivor Series every year, especially watching the old Survivor Series and watching War Games. The way they built to the War Games teams reminded me of the old school Survivor Series, a mystery team partner, like people getting jumped, like surprise run-ins. Like, that's what I used to love about Survivor Series so much. And so I'm so excited. I guess War Games will be already have happened, but like the build up to it, I thought was so cool. But don't you want someone else involved in wrestling who just loves it and isn't going to completely take a dump on it every fucking week? And what I love about you is if you have a problem with something, you will be like, here's what I would do. And then I get really excited about Sam's version. And then by the time I'm disappointed, I forgot about Sam's version. So it was fun while it lasted.
It's almost like a challenge. Like, okay, I get it. This isn't ideal. Here's where we can go from here. And you figure out how to back out of this corner that you've backed yourself into.
Well, and your Lana story. I mean, I think people need to hear that stuff sometimes because like when you ran through what you wanted to happen with Lana. Like, I got legitimately excited, and then it made me watch it with a less, I don't want to say critical, because like critical is good, but a less
cynical,
pessimistic.
Yeah.
Because you go, oh fuck, right, you can do this. Everybody forgot about Lana thing, like blah blah blah. And now the tables, like there was just it made the story more dynamic.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I was more disappointed that Lana's table smashing streak got broken than I was that the Undertaker streak got broken.
Yeah. Yes.
Lana's tables are now 9-2 on Raw, and I'm pretty bummed about it. I want her to go through tables again. I thought it was great.
Dude, I couldn't agree more.
Well, what's the name? What's the name of the album so people can find it and people can stream it?
Yes. So the name of the album, it's 25% capacity. It was written and recorded during the pandemic, during quarantine. It was at this like shady warehouse in Colorado because a lot of venues weren't open. And like I had club dates. I had a couple club dates this year, but I kind of purposefully wanted to record it so it like sounded like 2020. I feel like if somebody put out like an old special right now from a theater, it just wouldn't ring like, as true. Whereas, dude, the place I recorded it was so shady. And I think I even pointed it out on the album where I met these two kids who like road tripped up to see it. And their Uber driver didn't want to drop them off because they were like, this is not safe. Like this clearly cannot be the right address. It was literally in like an unmarked warehouse. And yeah, the album's just about like loneliness and fucking COVID and doing mushrooms and figuring shit out. And I think it's really fun. I think it's the funniest album I've put out, period. I'm really proud of it. And yeah, I mean, it sums up 2020 nicely. And yeah, so it would have just come out when this releases. So if you listen to it now, it'll help get it to number one. If it gets to number one, then fucking wrestlers see it. And that's all I want.
Get Jamie Kilstein's album, 25% capacity, to number one on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you get stuff, because that way he can be the next 24/7 champion.
This is all I want. I want to be jumping out of pianos with all those little guys. They're tiny. Also, Baron Corbin started following me on Twitter. So it's happening, guys. It's all coming together.
That's a great follow. It's a great follow.
I'm convinced he did it accidentally.
Maybe.
But I'm rolling with it.
Still counts.
It still counts.
Still counts. And they don't notify you if you get an unfollow, so don't even check.
I'm not going to. I'm never going to his page again.
Jamie Kilstein, thanks, man.
Thank you so much, buddy.